Arlen Finch looked at the crumbling ruins and thought, well, this ain't Kansas, and I'm sure as hell no Dorothy. Ganymede was the kind of place that made you question all your life choices. High winds, freezing temperatures, and the constant nagging sense that you were just a cosmic footnote in some alien's diary. But here he was, leading a team of experts that included Zephyr Hayes, a linguist who could charm snakes if snakes cared about human languages, and Rook Solstice, the economist who argued that numbers were sexier than they seemed. Finch, for his part, thought numbers were about as sexy as a bowl of cold soup, but Rook had a way with spreadsheets that bordered on unnatural. These ruins are ancient, Zephyr said, adjusting her visor. Older than your taste in music, Finch. Hey, 21st century grunge is timeless, Finch replied, kicking a rock and watching it skitter across the barren landscape. Besides, it's not like the Xyler are going to give us a tour guide. They're too busy scratching their heads over our obsession with trading green paper for goods, Rook snorted, brushing off a layer of moon dust from his jacket. Their economy is based on tangible resources. They're puzzled why we give value to paper and digital numbers. Makes us look like we're trading bonbons for gold bars, Finch shrugged. Well, maybe they have a point. But I still doubt they'd appreciate a good stock market crash. Remember, they are the same folks who thought a luxury was having 3 moons to look at. Just then, a loud clang echoed through the ruins, snapping everyone's attention to the north entrance. What the hell was that? Finch asked, already knowing it was something that would probably ruin his day. Zephyr leaned closer to inspect a glyph on the wall. If my translation's right, that sound could be a welcome or a warning. I'm betting on the latter, given our usual luck. Great, Finch muttered. Why'd I even get out of bed today? He motioned for the team to follow him, edging cautiously towards the sound. As they approached, the shadowy figure of a Xyler emerged, its bulbous eyes blinking in what could only be described as befuddlement. It was holding something that looked suspiciously like a copy of Earth's Economic Practices for Dummies. The Xyler's mouth opened, emitting a series of clicks and whirs that Zephyr hastily translated. It's asking why we exchange colorful paper for resources when we could just barter. Finch rolled his eyes, crossing his arms over his chest. Tell them that without those colorful papers, our world would descend into anarchy faster than you could say economic collapse. Zephyr dutifully relayed the message, but the Xyler's confusion only deepened, its eyes narrowing as if it were trying to solve a particularly vexing puzzle. Rook stepped forward, his expression one of feigned patience. Look, Rook said, spreading his hands wide. Imagine if suddenly all your trading systems were wiped away and you had to rely on shells or some crap. That's kinda what we're dealing with. Would you like that? The Xyler responded with more clicks and whirs, which Zephyr translated as, but shells have intrinsic value. Rook sighed, running a hand through his hair. I'm gonna need a strong drink after this, Finch mused. Maybe 2, Zephyr chuckled. Make it 3 and I'll join you. Just to watch the world burn from afar. Their conversation was interrupted by another Xyler, this one holding a device that looked suspiciously like Earth's version of a clipboard, albeit with more blinking lights and fewer clipboards. It wants to make a deal, Zephyr said, reading the Xyler's gestures. Something about exchanging technology for an understanding of our dysfunctional yet strangely resilient economic system. Finch smirked. Sounds like they want a front row seat to the circus. Rook shrugged, turning his attention back to the ruins. Well, at least they're curious. Curiosity is the first step towards evolution, right? Even if it means understanding our bizarre appetites for risk and disaster. Zephyr nodded. Yeah, and maybe they'll teach us something about bartering before we crash and burn. Finch raised an eyebrow. Hum. And maybe pigs will fly, but until then, let's see if we can make something useful out of this mess. The team moved deeper into the ruins, a labyrinth of corridors and arches that seemed to stretch on forever. The air was thick with dust and the weight of ages, each footstep echoing like a reminder of their mortality. You ever think we might be digging up something better left buried? Zephyr asked, her voice bouncing off the ancient walls. Finch glanced over his shoulder, a crooked grin on his lips. Constantly. But then again, what's life without a little risk? Less exciting, certainly, Rook chimed in, peering at the worn carvings that lined the walls. Although exciting is not always desirable. Oh, look at you with your fancy words, Finch teased as they rounded another corner only to find a dead end. So what's the plan? Dig, dig, and dig some more, Zephyr sighed, staring at the hieroglyphs. These symbols tell a story, but it's like reading a book with the pages ripped out. We can guess at the plot, but the details are murky at best. Rook knelt down, brushing away dirt to reveal a mosaic. Well, whatever the story was, it ended here. Maybe we should take a page from the Xylar and focus on what we can actually use. Finch agreed reluctantly. Fine. Let's head back and see if we can turn this cultural exchange into something less of a joke. As they retraced their steps, the weight of the ruins pressing down on them, the shadows grew longer, like fingers reaching out to grab hold of their intentions and twist them into something else entirely. Stepping out into the weak light of Ganymede, Finch squinted at the Xylar delegation waiting for them. Back for round two, eh? He called, though he was ready for a fight or flight at this point. The lead Xylar raised its multi-fingered hand in what had to be a universal gesture of goodwill. Or maybe they just wanted to see if humans could be trusted not to wreck more cultural heritage sites. They're offering technology in exchange for more economic theory, Zephyr translated, her voice tinged with disbelief. Oh goody, Finch said, voice dripping with sarcasm. I always wanted to be an economics professor. As the negotiations continued, Finch couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity of it all. Here they were, humans and aliens trying to find common ground through the exchange of baffling concepts. Hey, if this works out, Rook said, a twinkle in his eye, maybe we can franchise this mess. Come for the ruins, stay for the economic comedy. Zephyr looked on, a bemused smile playing on her lips. If we survive, you'll make a killing. And so the uneasy dance began, a strange waltz between two species that barely understood each other but were willing to try, if only for a chance to laugh at the cosmic joke they were part of. Finch couldn't help but feel that maybe, just maybe, humanity had found its true calling in the vast unknown, being the universe's resident comedians. But as they turned their attention back to the Xylar, Finch caught a glimpse of something glinting in the ruins, half buried and forgotten. A relic of the past, or perhaps a clue for the future. He'd have to dig a little deeper, push a little harder. After all, life on Ganymede was nothing if not a relentless excavation of possibilities, each one more absurd than the last, and Finch wouldn't have it any other way. Finch cursed under his breath as a gust of wind whipped across the barren expanse, reminding him just how much Ganymede hated his guts. The planet was like a bad date, cold, inhospitable, and always making you pay the bill. As the team trudged back towards the labyrinthine ruins, he couldn't shake the feeling that they'd stepped into something way above their pay grade. Zephyr was yammering on about the Xylar's offer to exchange tech for economic knowledge, her voice barely audible over the howling wind. Seriously, Finch. Imagine explaining derivatives to a species that thinks a bank is where you keep fish. Yeah, Finch grumbled, I'm sure they'll love learning about subprime mortgages. Like teaching toddlers to juggle chainsaws. Rook, ever the optimist, chuckled. Come on, guys. If they're willing to trade, maybe we can learn a thing or two about sustainability. You know, not destroying a planet every couple of millennia, yeah. And maybe we can teach them about the thrill of a good recession, Finch shot back. The entrance to the ruins loomed ahead, a gaping maw that seemed to swallow what little light managed to break through Ganymede's icy atmosphere. Inside, the air was stale, like the breath of something long dead. Let's dive back into the belly of the beast, Finch muttered, taking the lead. The labyrinth was a twisting, turning nightmare of corridors that felt like they'd been designed by a sadistic architect with a vendetta against straight lines. Each path threatened to lead to a dead end, or worse, A trap of some sort. Zephyr paused, examining a mural that depicted what looked to be a Xylar conference, complete with angry gesticulations. This is interesting. It's like they had their own stock market crash, she said, tracing the angry figures with a gloved finger. Great, Finch said, squinting at the mural. They crashed an economy without even a hedge fund in sight. Amateurs, or maybe that's their version of art, Rook suggested. You know, abstract expressionism. Misery loves company and all that. They pressed on deeper into the maze. The walls bore inscriptions that Zephyr occasionally paused to study, her expression a mix of intrigue and exasperation. If I'm reading this right, these ruins were a hub of technological innovation, she remarked. Good, Finch said, because I could use a new toaster. Deeper still they ventured, until they stumbled upon a room that seemed different from the others. The walls were lined with strange metallic pods, each one humming faintly. A series of glyphs ran across the floor in a dizzying pattern. What do you make of this? Finch asked, resisting the urge to poke one of the pods with a stick. Zephyr's eyes widened as she deciphered the glyphs. Holy crap! This isn't just tech. It's bioengineering on a massive scale. They were manipulating life itself. Of course they were, Rook said, sounding impressed rather than concerned. Aliens with a god complex. Who'd have thunk it? Finch's stomach twisted. Yeah, because playing God always ends well. Look at us. He gestured around, indicating the crumbling ruins and, by extension, humanity's own shaky track record. Zephyr focused on a particular set of glyphs, her expression darkening. This is bad, really bad. These pods, they contain a bioengineered plague, designed to control populations, sort of like a cosmic reset button. Jesus, Finch whispered. A plague. You're telling me we've been farting around in an intergalactic petri dish? Rook tapped a pod, his brow furrowed. Looks like it. And if these things are still active, then we've got a ticking time bomb on our hands, Zephyr finished. Fantastic, Finch said, sarcasm dripping from his words like poison. I always wanted to be part of a doomsday scenario. Bucket list, check. Rook crossed his arms, deep in thought. So what do? We can't exactly call in sick on this one. Finch rubbed his temples, feeling a headache blossom like a malevolent flower. First, we figure out if these things are still operational. Maybe the Xylar left us a user manual or something. Hopefully with less jargon than our economic textbooks, Zephyr muttered, already scanning the glyphs for more clues. The room was silent save for the low hum of the pods, an unsettling reminder of the potential horror they contained. Finch felt like he was part of some cosmic joke, one that wasn't nearly as funny now that he realized the punchline might involve mass extinction. Zephyr's eyes darted over the glyphs, her expression a mix of concentration and worry. There's a sequence here. Looks like a failsafe. If we can activate it, we might be able to neutralize the threat. Great, Finch said, because nothing says fun like messing with alien technology we barely understand. Rook sighed. Beats doing nothing and waiting for things to go sideways. True, Finch conceded. All right, Zephyr. What's the plan? Zephyr outlined a series of steps, her voice steady despite the grim situation. If we input the sequence, it should trigger a shutdown. But it's risky. One wrong move and we could activate the whole damn plague instead. Wonderful, Finch said dryly. A real choose-your-own-adventure, with death as the prize. The team set to work, each of them acutely aware of the ticking clock hanging over their heads. As they entered the sequence, Finch couldn't help but think about how absurd it all was. Here they were, three humans trying to outsmart a piece of alien tech that could wipe them off the face of the galaxy. I swear, if we survive this, I'm retiring, Finch said as he carefully adjusted a panel covered in inscrutable symbols. Rook chuckled. You'd get bored. Besides, where else can you find work that's this exciting? You're right, Finch admitted. Maybe I'll just take up a safer hobby. Like juggling chainsaws, with Zephyr guiding them, they managed to input the sequence, each step bringing them closer to either salvation or catastrophe. Finch's heart pounded, each second stretching out into eternity. Finally, with a press of a final button, the room hummed with energy. The pods shuddered, and for a terrifying moment Finch thought they'd failed. But then the hum faded, replaced by a low, steady beep. Zephyr exhaled, relief washing over her features. We did it. The failsafe worked, thank God, Finch said, his legs nearly buckling with relief. For a minute there, I thought we were about to star in our own disaster movie. Rook grinned. We still might. We've got to figure out what to tell the Xyler. Explaining this mess is gonna be a nightmare. Finch nodded. Yeah, but at least we're alive to do it. Let's get the hell out of here before something else goes wrong. As they made their way back through the labyrinth, Finch marveled at the absurdity of it all. They'd come to Ganymede for a cultural exchange and ended up saving the galaxy from an ancient plague. Just another day at the office. Outside, the wind howled its familiar greeting, but Finch felt lighter somehow. Maybe it was the knowledge that they'd narrowly avoided disaster, or maybe it was the realization that, for all their flaws, humanity still had a knack for pulling through. As they approached the Xyler delegation, Finch shared a look with Zephyr and Rook. "All right, folks," he said, squaring his shoulders for the coming exchange. "Let's go teach these aliens a thing or two about human ingenuity. And maybe, just maybe, learn something useful in return." The Xyler stood ready to greet them, their bulbous eyes wide with curiosity and a hint of trepidation. Finch took a deep breath and prepared to navigate the cosmic comedy one conversation at a time, knowing full well that the universe wasn't done laughing at them just yet. The air on Ganymede had the quality of a bad hangover, sharp, unforgiving, and a constant reminder of your own stupidity. Arlen Finch gritted his teeth as he approached the Xyler delegation. They stood like a bunch of oversized marbles, their skin a shifting iridescence that reminded Finch of an oil spill. It was hard to trust anything that's shiny. "Well, here we are," he muttered, casting a glance at Zephyr and Rook. "Time to explain human economics to a species that probably thinks a hedge fund involves actual hedges." Zephyr smirked. "Hey, if we can get them to understand the concept of credit default swaps, maybe they'll teach us how to not blow up our planet every few thousand years." "Right. Because giving aliens a crash course in our financial disasters is a great use of our time," Finch replied, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "I can barely explain this stuff to my accountant." The Xyler leader, a being with more eyes than seemed strictly necessary, blinked slowly at them, as if trying to process the unusual human penchant for sarcasm. One eye turned to each of the humans, making Finch feel like he was being scrutinized under a cosmic microscope. "Welcome, Earth representatives," the Xyler leader intoned, in a voice that sounded like a dozen cats purring in concert. "We are eager to exchange knowledge." "Great," Finch said, forcing a smile that felt as genuine as a politician's promise. "Let's dive right in, shall we? We've got a thrilling tale of economic ups and downs that you're going to love." As they began the painstaking process of explaining earthly economics, Finch felt a nagging itch at the back of his mind, like an unscratchable mosquito bite. The ruins they just left were still very much in play, and the knowledge of the ticking biological time bomb they'd narrowly deactivated weighed heavily on him. Zephyr took over, her linguistic talents painting a vivid picture of human financial systems, or as Finch liked to call it, the world's most elaborate game of Monopoly. The Xyler nodded politely, though it was hard to tell if they understood or were simply indulging them. "Now, imagine," Zephyr was saying, "a system where you constantly owe someone else more than you actually have. It's like a giant planet-wide scheme." "Fascinating," the Xyler said, their attention divided equally among the trio. "And this debt is considered valuable, about as valuable as a hole in a spacesuit," Finch interjected. "But we pretend otherwise. It's like keeping a pet tiger in your apartment, exciting until you realize it's just waiting for the right moment to eat you." The Xyler contemplated this. "Your world sounds perilous." "You have no idea," Rook added, his grin sardonic. "But we manage, somehow." The conversation continued, but Finch couldn't shake the feeling of impending doom. As Zephyr delved into the concept of stock markets, he caught a strange movement out of the corner of his eye, a shadowy flicker that sent a shiver down his spine. He turned, scanning the icy horizon, but saw nothing. "Something wrong?" Zephyr asked, noticing his distraction. "Probably just my nerves," Finch replied. "Or maybe we've finally attracted the attention of Ganymed's local ghost population." Rook chuckled. "Or the Xyler's security system. Can't blame them for being cautious after we've poked around their abandoned mineshaft of horrors." "Yeah," Finch said absently, his gaze still sweeping the desolate landscape. "But it feels like something's changed." Zephyr and Rook exchanged a glance, but before they could press him further, a loud clang echoed from the direction of the ruins, cutting through the air like a knife. Finch's heart skipped a beat. The clang reverberated with a sense of foreboding, like the universe itself had just dropped a wrench into the works. "That's not ideal," Finch said, his voice tight. "Sounds like the welcome wagons come back to say hello," Zephyr remarked, though her expression betrayed her concern. The Xyler leader turned its many eyes toward the ruins, an unsettling synchronization that made Finch's skin crawl. "Is there a problem?" "Define problem," Finch replied. "If you mean a loud, ominous noise that suggests something's gone horribly wrong, then yes, we might have a tiny issue." The Xyler exchanged glances, their expressions inscrutable. "We should investigate." "Brilliant idea," Finch muttered. "Because nothing screams fun like wandering back into a death maze." With little choice, the team turned back toward the ruins, the Xyler delegation following behind like an intergalactic entourage. The wind had picked up, howling with a new intensity that seemed to echo Finch's unease. The entrance yawned before them, as unwelcoming as ever. Finch hesitated, then took a deep breath. Into the abyss once more. Inside, the air was colder, the shadows deeper. The clang had stopped, but its aftermath lingered like a bad smell. Finch led the way, his mind racing as he tried to piece together the puzzle. It wasn't long before they reached the room with the pods. The eerie hum had returned, and as they approached, Zephyr swore under her breath. "What's wrong?" Finch asked, though he had a sinking feeling he already knew. "The sequence," Zephyr said, her voice tight. "It's been altered." "You're kidding," Finch said, though he knew she wasn't. "How the hell did that happen?" "No idea," Zephyr replied, already examining the control panel with frantic precision. "But if these things reactivate, they'll unleash a plague that makes the Black Death look like a mild cold," Rook said, his usual levity absent. "Fantastic," Finch said. And here I was, thinking we'd wrap this up in a neat little bow. As they worked to decipher the alien script and reset the failsafe, the Xyler watched with interest. Their leader stepped forward, its eyes focused on the pods. "These are containment units," it asked, a hint of unease in its otherwise smooth purr. "That's one way to put it," Finch said. "Think of them as Pandora's boxes, but instead of hope, you've got a pathogen that could wipe out half the galaxy." "That is troubling," the Xyler leader observed, its eyes narrowing. "No kidding," Finch replied. "So, any chance you've got a manual lying around here?" "Because we're flying blind, and I don't fancy being patient zero." Zephyr worked quickly, her fingers dancing over the glyphs with the urgency of someone defusing a bomb. Finch held his breath, the room's oppressive silence weighing heavily on his shoulders. "Almost got it," Zephyr muttered. "Just need to." A sudden jolt rocked the room, the floor shuddering beneath their feet. Finch stumbled, cursing as he caught himself against a pod. "What now?" Rook exclaimed, bracing himself against the wall. "Looks like Ganymed's throwing us a curveball," Finch said, trying to mask his rising panic with bravado. The Xyler leader turned to them, a sense of urgency in its multitude of eyes. "Your assistance is required. We must stabilize this technology." "Working on it," Zephyr said through gritted teeth. "Just need a little more time." Finch could feel the tension coiling like a spring, ready to snap. With every second that ticked by, the risk of catastrophe loomed larger. "Rook, see if you can find anything that looks like an override switch," Finch ordered, his mind racing. "Preferably one that doesn't trigger a self-destruct." "On it," Rook replied, moving to the far side of the room. The Xylar leader joined Zephyr at the control panel, its slender fingers deftly matching her movements. For a moment, Finch marveled at the surreal partnership. Two species, worlds apart, working together to avert disaster. "You know," Finch said, his voice low, "when I signed up for this mission, I didn't expect to play intergalactic pest control." Zephyr glanced up, her expression a mix of amusement and exasperation. "Wouldn't miss it for the world, right?" "Yeah," Finch replied, "but I was hoping for a few fewer extinction-level threats." Another vibration rippled through the room, more intense this time. Finch felt his heart leap into his throat, the air tingling with static. "Almost there," Zephyr said, her voice tense. Finch could only watch as the delicate dance continued, the fate of more lives than he cared to count hanging in the balance. It was moments like these that reminded him just how fragile existence really was. Finally, with a triumphant click, the sequence locked into place. The room's oppressive hum faded, replaced by the steady beep that signaled a successful reset. "We did it," Zephyr said, her relief palpable. "Nice work," Finch said, allowing himself a shaky exhale. "Now let's get the hell out of here before this planet decides to throw another tantrum." The Xylar leader inclined its head, its eyes reflecting a gratitude that needed no translation. "We are in your debt, Earth representatives." Finch chuckled, though his laughter was laced with exhaustion. "Just another day in the life." Now about that technology exchange. Outside, the wind had calmed, the air a little less hostile now that they'd averted another disaster. Finch felt a weight lift from his shoulders as they emerged from the ruins, the Xylar delegation close behind. As they regrouped, Finch couldn't help but reflect on the absurdity of it all. Here they were, three humans negotiating with aliens while defusing ancient doomsday devices. Not exactly what he'd pictured when he thought of diplomacy. "Well," Rook said, clapping Finch on the back, "that was one hell of a day." "What's next? A friendly game of chess with the Xylar?" "God, I hope not," Finch replied, though his fatigue was softened by a hint of humor. "I'm terrible at chess." As they began the long trek back to their base, Finch couldn't help but feel a strange sense of camaraderie with the Xylar. For all their differences, they'd managed to find common ground amid the chaos. "Think we'll ever get used to this?" Zephyr asked, her tone light but earnest. "Doubt it," Finch replied, a wry smile tugging at his lips. "But that's what makes life interesting, right?" With each step, the shadows of the labyrinth faded behind them, leaving only the uncertain path ahead. Finch squared his shoulders, ready to face whatever cosmic joke the universe had in store next. After all, they'd gotten this far. And in a galaxy full of unknowns, that was something to hold on to. "Just when you thought things couldn't get any worse," Rook announced, peering over the edge of a rusted console with the enthusiasm of a man discovering his lottery ticket was actually an unpaid bill. Finch leaned against a wall, trying to ignore the groan it gave in response. "What now?" "Did the Xylar install a surprise party button?" "Nope," Rook replied, tapping away at the touch interface. "It's more like they've got a built-in apocalypse app. Turns out this plague is tied to their economy." "Great," Finch sighed, rubbing his temples. "That's like discovering your credit score is linked to the weather." "Exactly," Rook said, flashing a grin that was more grim than amused. "If this thing kicks off, we might end up not just broke, but a headline in the obituary section of a galactic newsletter." The Xylar leader, ever the silent observer, leaned in, its multitude of eyes reflecting the dim light in an unsettling kaleidoscope. "Your economic systems are infected." "Not exactly," Zephyr interjected, looking up from her latest archaeological find, a manuscript written in a language that could have been Klingon, for all Finch knew. "It's more like your economic systems have a built-in self-destruct if tampered with the wrong way." "So you're saying the money here could literally kill us," Finch muttered. "I always thought economics was deadly boring, but this is a whole new level." Zephyr shrugged, focusing on the ancient script. "Who knew the secret to interstellar financial stability was not touching anything, like a cosmic don't touch the stove rule," Rook added. Except the stove is the entire universe. The Xylar leader listened intently, its expression unreadable. When it finally spoke, its voice was smooth as ever, betraying none of the potential doom Rook described. We did not anticipate this level of integration. It seems our histories are more intertwined than we thought. Yeah, great, Finch said. Too bad that intertwining might end with us all in body bags. Zephyr coughed, drawing attention back to her. This manuscript, she began, tracing a finger over the glyphs. It might hold the key to untangling this mess. It talks about an ancient protocol the Xylar once used, something about economic harmonization. Sounds like the kind of nonsense our politicians would love, Finch remarked. Is there anything in there that doesn't sound like a committee's fever dream? Zephyr ignored him, her eyes scanning the text with the fervor of someone who actually enjoyed this sort of torture. It mentions mitigating systemic risks by harmonizing resource distribution. Basically, it's supposed to balance out the system to prevent collapse. Like a financial cumbaya, Rook asked, raising an eyebrow. More like a cosmic intervention, Zephyr clarified. If we can figure out how to implement it, we might stabilize the situation here before it goes south. Finch snorted. Call me a pessimist, but trusting an ancient script to save us feels like betting on a three-legged horse at the races. Or investing in a company whose only product is a do-not-push button, Rook added. Exactly, Finch nodded. But I suppose we don't have many options. So, Zephyr, what do we need to do? Zephyr tapped the manuscript thoughtfully. First, we need to decode this completely. Then we have to adjust the sequence here to play nice with the Xylar's technology. Easy, right? Finch deadpanned. Just rewrite ancient alien code without causing a meltdown. Piece of cake. The Xylar leader, who'd been listening with its unnerving attention, finally spoke. Your confidence is appreciated. We trust your abilities. Well, that's one of us, Finch muttered under his breath. Ignoring Finch's sarcasm, Zephyr got to work, her fingers dancing deftly over the control panel, trying to match ancient theory with modern reality. For once, the Xylar leader stepped back, allowing her the space to operate. Rook, meanwhile, sifted through what looked like a blueprint of the Xylar's tech infrastructure, or maybe a particularly complex abstract painting. These circuits are weaved like a drunken spider's web, he muttered. Perfect metaphor for the day, Finch agreed. We're stumbling through someone else's dream and hoping we don't wake the nightmare. It was a precarious balance. Every beep of the console, every flicker of light seemed to draw the tension tighter. Finch could almost hear the ticking of an invisible clock, counting down to an unspecified disaster. You know, Rook said, his eyes not leaving the screen, if we pull this off, we might just earn ourselves a raise. Finch snorted. Assuming we live to spend it, Zephyr chuckled, though her focus remained fixed. That's the spirit. Who knew near-death experiences could be so lucrative? Only if you're a motivational speaker, Finch replied, or running a luxury coffin business. Behind them, the wind outside picked up, a low howling that set Finch's nerves on edge. It was as if even the planet was getting impatient, urging them to wrap things up before it decided to finish the job itself. For a moment, silence reigned, broken only by the rhythmic hum of machines and the occasional muttered curse from Zephyr as she pieced together the ancient puzzle. Finally, with a triumphant beep, Zephyr sat back. I think I've got it. The harmonization protocol is ready to deploy, assuming this doesn't blow us to kingdom come. There's a comforting thought, Finch remarked. If all else fails, at least we'll go out with a bang. The Xylar leader inclined its head, an alien nod that seemed almost respectful. We have faith in your expertise. Faith or desperation? Finch asked, though he wasn't really expecting an answer. Rook moved to Zephyr's side, looking over the final schematics. All right, let's do this. Worst case, we become a cautionary tale for future generations. Or a footnote in some academic's paper, Finch added, though I'd prefer not to be reduced to a statistic. With a shared glance, Zephyr and Rook initiated the sequence. The air hummed with energy, a palpable tension that set Finch's teeth on edge. It was the kind of atmosphere that made you want to hold your breath, as if breathing too loudly might set off an explosion. The sequence began to unfold, a dance of lights and sounds that seemed to operate on some level beyond human understanding. Finch found himself holding his breath anyway, watching as the room seemed to hold its breath with him. And then, like a spell breaking, the tension evaporated. The lights settled into a steady glow, the machines hummed contentedly, and the oppressive weight of impending catastrophe lifted. "Did we just save the galaxy?" Rook asked, a grin splitting his face. "Let's not get ahead of ourselves," Finch said, though he couldn't quite keep the relief out of his voice. "We might have just delayed the inevitable. Either way, we're still breathing," Zephyr said, standing and stretching with the satisfaction of a job well done. The Xylar leader inclined its head once more. "You have our gratitude, Earth representatives." "Just another day on the job," Finch replied, though he couldn't suppress the ghost of a smile. "Now about that technology exchange," the Xylar leader blinked, an unsettling ripple of its many eyes. "Of course, we shall honor our agreement." Rook chuckled, clapping Finch on the back. "Looks like we might retire early after all. Assuming we don't get another call to save the universe," Finch said. "Which, knowing our luck, will probably be sooner rather than later." With the immediate crisis averted, they began the trek back towards their base. Outside, the air was crisp with the bite of cold, but it felt less hostile now. The shadows of the labyrinthine ruins stretched behind them, a reminder of the chaos they'd narrowly avoided. "Think we'll ever get used to this?" Zephyr asked, echoing her earlier question. Finch shrugged, stuffing his hands into his pockets. "Probably not, but that's part of the fun, right?" "Speak for yourself," Rook said, though his tone was light. "I'd prefer my excitement with a little less mortal peril." As they walked, Finch couldn't shake a sense of satisfaction. For all the absurdity of the situation, they'd managed to find a solution where none seemed possible. It was a small victory, but in a universe full of unknowns, any victory was worth celebrating. "Well," Zephyr said, breaking the comfortable silence, "at least we didn't end up as cosmic dust. That's something." "Yeah," Finch agreed, feeling an unfamiliar sense of accomplishment. "I suppose it is." And with that they continued their journey, leaving behind the ruins and the chaos they'd conquered. Whatever other challenges awaited them, Finch felt confident they could handle it. After all, they'd faced worse and survived. For now, that was enough. The team trudged back through the ruins, the wind howling like a miffed banshee. Ganymed's icy air hit Finch in the face like a wet slap, as if the universe was reminding them not to get too comfortable. His breath fogged up, an ephemeral reminder that he was, for now, still breathing. They'd narrowly avoided catastrophe, but the lingering tension in the air suggested they weren't out of the woods yet. Well, if Ganymede had woods instead of frozen wasteland. "We've definitely pissed off some cosmic entity," Finch grumbled, kicking a loose rock. It skittered away, disappearing into the darkness like their margin for error. Zephyr shot him a look. "Maybe if you were nicer to celestial bodies, we wouldn't end up in these situations." "I'm plenty nice," Finch protested. "I just have a face that screams I don't trust you, and the universe probably doesn't like being questioned. Probably why it keeps trying to kill us," Rook chimed in, ever the optimist. "Though its attempts are getting more creative. Next thing you know, we'll be strangled by our own shoelaces," Finch joked. "Death by footwear. That's a headline for the ages." The Xylar leader glided behind them, silent as a judge, its many eyes blinking in an unsettling cascade. It had the unnerving habit of letting them forget it was there, only to remind them with a sudden, silent movement. "Could you not do that?" Finch said over his shoulder. "I've already got a heart condition from this job. No need to contribute further." The Xylar leader blinked slowly, a ripple of iridescence moving across its skin. "We apologize if our presence is unsettling." "Unsettling." Understatement of the year, Finch replied, managing a weak grin. "But hey, at least you're not trying to kill us, so that's something." Yet, Zephyr added dryly, casting a wary glance at their alien companion. As if on cue, the ground beneath them rumbled ominously, a low growl that seemed to promise unpleasant surprises. Finch swore under his breath, instinctively grabbing onto a nearby pillar for support. "Fantastic," he muttered. "Earthquakes. Just what we needed to make this day even more memorable. I always wanted to experience a lunar quake," Rook quipped, managing to hang on to his balance. "Now I can cross that off my bucket list. Let's just hope the bucket isn't what we end up in," Zephyr said, scanning the ruins with a practiced eye. "These structures are ancient and not exactly up to code. Wouldn't trust them to hold up a sneeze," Finch agreed, casting a wary glance at the ominous shadows lurking around them. "We should hurry." They pressed forward, the air thick with tension and the promise of disaster. Finch's mind raced, grappling with the reality of their situation. They'd managed to avert one crisis, but the specter of another loomed large. The Xyler's economic systems were as unstable as a three-legged chair, and despite their best efforts, they were dancing on the edge of an abyss. Arlen Finch had always been a skeptic. Cynicism was practically encoded in his DNA, but even he couldn't ignore the gnawing sense of vulnerability that had settled in his gut. Their mission was a tightrope walk over a pit of stakes, and one misstep could send them all plummeting. Zephyr fell into step beside him, her expression thoughtful. "You think we'll actually manage this?" "Manage what?" "Not dying." "I'd say the odds are about 50-50, Finch replied, his voice laced with sarcasm. "I meant the mission," Zephyr said, shooting him a sidelong glance. "We've come this far, there's still a chance." "Chance? Sure. There's always a chance," Finch said, a bitter edge to his words. "Like there's a chance I'll win the lottery and retire to a nice beach planet." "Doesn't mean it's realistic. You could be a little more optimistic," Rook chimed in, his tone annoyingly upbeat. "Optimistic?" Finch snorted. "I'm plenty optimistic. I'm optimistic that we'll screw up and become an example in some intergalactic textbook." Zephyr chuckled, though the sound was tinged with exhaustion. "You're insufferable, Finch." "It's part of my charm," Finch shot back, though his mind was still whirring. The mission might still be salvageable, but the stakes kept getting higher by the minute. Trusting ancient scripts and alien tech felt like trusting a fox to guard your chickens. Sure, it might work out, but odds were you'd end up with feathers everywhere. As they continued through the winding corridors of the ruins, the weight of uncertainty settled over them like an unwelcome blanket. Every echo seemed to carry the whispers of past civilizations, their failures a haunting reminder of what awaited if things went south. "Do you think the Xyler really trust us?" Rook asked, breaking the heavy silence. "Trust? Probably not," Zephyr replied, her voice thoughtful. "They're desperate. Desperation and trust don't exactly go hand in hand," Finch muttered. "More like desperation and poor decisions." "Well, let's hope their poor decision involves not vaporizing us," Rook said with a grin. "I'm getting attached to breathing." "Breathing's overrated," Finch replied, trying to lighten the mood. It was an old habit, finding humor in the absurd, laughing in the face of doom. Better to laugh than to let the fear take hold. As if sensing their unease, the Xyler leader finally spoke. "We understand your apprehension. This is new for us as well. Glad to know we're all in the same boat of uncertainty," Finch said. "Though our boat feels more like a raft made of twigs, spirits remain high," the Xyler leader replied, its voice oddly soothing. "An admirable quality. Spirits and stupidity often look the same," Finch pointed out. "We just happen to excel at both." The Xyler leader's many eyes blinked again, a ripple of alien thought passing through its mind. "Your perspective is unique." "Unique is one way to put it," Zephyr said, shaking her head. "Recklessly stubborn is another." The shadows grew long as they finally reached their base, the makeshift hub of their operation. It wasn't much, a jumble of technology held together by hope and duct tape, but it was home, at least for now. Finch sank into the nearest chair, grateful to be free of the crushing weight of responsibility, if only for a moment. "So what's the plan, folks?" Zephyr and Rook both glanced at each other, a silent conversation passing between them. "We need more information," Zephyr said finally. "The manuscript was just the tip of the iceberg. We need to dig deeper, Of course, because one ancient death trap wasn't enough, Finch muttered. Why not go for the full set? We have to. The Xyler's systems are too integrated with Ior's now, Rook said. If we don't find a solution, we're done for. Great. No pressure then, Finch replied, running a hand through his hair. Just the fate of two civilizations hanging in the balance. Zephyr leaned forward, her expression earnest. We can do this, Finch. We have to. Finch sighed, the weight of her words settling over him. It was a tall order, but they didn't have a choice. They were in the thick of it now, and turning back wasn't an option. All right, he said finally. Let's find another death trap to poke with a stick. Zephyr managed a smile, and even Rook looked relieved. Finch ignored the gnawing doubt in his gut, focusing instead on the task at hand. They'd come too far to back down now. With a new plan in place, they began their preparations, the hum of machinery filling the air once more. The Xyler leader watched silently, its presence a constant reminder of the stakes involved. Think we'll survive this? Finch asked, his voice low. We've survived worse, Zephyr replied with a wry smile. That's not exactly encouraging, Finch said, though he couldn't quite suppress a grin of his own. And so they worked, the clock ticking down as they delved deeper into the mysteries of the Xyler technology. The shadows loomed, and the dark humor that had sustained them wavered under the weight of reality. But they pressed on, driven by the stubborn resolve that had carried humanity through countless trials. Vulnerability and resilience, intertwined in a dance as old as time. It wasn't much, but it was enough. For now. The Iors slipped by, a blur of calculations and frantic adjustments. Finch tried not to think too much about the potential for catastrophic failure, focusing instead on the rhythm of the work. It was easier to ignore the fear that way. Everyone's still alive? Rook asked, his voice cutting through the silence. More or less, Finch replied. I think my sanity's on life support, though. Sanity is overrated, Rook said with a grin. Besides, we're in good company, hurtling towards potential doom, Zephyr added, trying to sound upbeat. Precisely, Rook agreed. What more could anyone ask for? Less doom, more room service, Finch suggested. Maybe some beachside cocktails. Dream big, Finch, Zephyr said, shaking her head. Dream big. The Xyler leader remained an inscrutable presence, observing their efforts with what might have been curiosity, or perhaps it was amusement. It was hard to tell with that many eyes. Do you ever wonder how we ended up here? Finch asked, his voice quieter now. All the time, Zephyr replied. Then I remember that this is what we signed up for this. Finch gestured around, encompassing the chaos. I must have missed the fine print. The fine print's always where they get you, Rook said, fiddling with a stubborn circuit. Of course, I thought it would be more explore strange new worlds and less try not to die horribly. Finch managed a chuckle, though it was tinged with exhaustion. Guess we should have read the terms and conditions. We'll get through this, Zephyr said firmly, her eyes meeting Finch's. We have to. Hope you're right, Finch replied, though he couldn't quite shake the doubt that lingered like a specter at the edge of his thoughts. The room fell into an uneasy silence, the only sound the quiet hum of machinery. Finch let the rhythm of their work lull him into a state of focus, pushing away the fear that threatened to overwhelm him. It was a fragile piece, held together by sheer determination and the faintest glimmer of hope. But for now, it was enough to keep them moving forward. And so they worked, the weight of their mission heavy on their shoulders. The shadows loomed ever larger, a constant reminder of the stakes involved. But they pressed on, driven by a stubborn resolve that defied reason. Human vulnerability and resilience, intertwined in a dance as old as time itself. It wasn't much, but it was enough. For now. As the hum of machinery filled the air, Zephyr stared at the console, a mix of hope and dread swirling in her thoughts. I think I've got something, she announced, trying to sound more confident than she felt. Finch looked up, one eyebrow raised with skepticism that could melt glaciers. Something? Please tell me it's more than the usual hello and welcome to certain death message these ruins like to spit out. No, this is good, Zephyr insisted. It's a breakthrough. Finch drawled. And here I thought breakthroughs were supposed to feel less like a panic attack. Rook, ever the beacon of misguided optimism, leaned over to see what Zephyr was studying. "What have you got, Zeph?" She gestured to the manuscript, the alien symbols glowing softly like a neon monument to madness. The Xylar economy, it's like a dance, tangible resources mingling in a way that makes our paper money system look like a kid's lemonade stand. Fantastic, Finch muttered. An interstellar waltz we weren't invited to. Zephyr ignored him, her focus unwavering. But there's a pattern here. If we integrate some of our trade principles, we might stabilize their economy without blowing us all to hell. Stabilize, huh? Finch said, skepticism still hanging in the air. And you figured this out while I was trying to recalibrate the life support. Call it a knack for languages, Zephyr replied, her eyes twinkling with a hint of mischief. Or maybe I'm just lucky. Lucky's good, Rook said, nodding. I'm a fan of lucky. Finch snorted. Luck's why we're here in the first place, remember. We lucked out of a stable job and into this cosmic joke. Relax, Finch, Zephyr said with a grin. Think of it as an opportunity. He rolled his eyes. Opportunity? Wonderful. I love opportunities that come with a side of imminent death. The Xylar leader approached, its many eyes focused intently on their discussion. You have discovered something. More like she's poking around in things we barely understand, Finch replied, his voice dripping with sarcasm. But yeah, she's got a plan. We propose a fusion, Zephyr said, her voice steady. Human adaptability and trade principles. We can stabilize your system by weaving it with iors, a sort of economic symbiosis. The Xylar leader blinked, its gaze unreadable. Interesting. Your human tenacity is notable. Finch smirked. Notable's one word for it. Reckless optimism's another. Call it what you want, but it might just work, Zephyr insisted. Rook leaned back, a thoughtful expression on his face. If it works, we save both our civilizations. If it doesn't, well, at least we tried. Such comfort, Finch said. I'm all for trying as long as trying doesn't end with us vaporized. Zephyr shot him a look that could have curdled milk. Look, we're in a bind here. This is the best shot we've got. Finch sighed, running a hand through his hair. All right. Let's give this a go. I'm all for living to gripe another day. The Xylar leader nodded, its eyes shifting in what might have been agreement. We shall proceed. This fusion of principles intrigues us. Fantastic, Finch muttered under his breath. Let's intrigue ourselves into a deeper hole. Zephyr ignored him, focusing on the task at hand. We'll need to adjust the system's protocols to integrate our trade models. It's risky, but doable. Risky's our middle name, Finch said, his voice dripping with irony. Right between foolhardy and disaster-prone. Keep it up, Finch, Zephyr said, smiling despite the tension. Your cynicism's what keeps us grounded. Grounded, huh? Finch replied. Just making sure we don't float off into the void. Let's get to it then, Rook said, clapping his hands together. No time like the present to save the universe. Or blow it up, Finch added, never one to miss a chance for a grim prediction. The team set to work, their movements a chaotic symphony of adjustments and recalibrations. The Xylar leader watched with an inscrutable gaze, its presence both comforting and unnerving. Think this'll really work? Rook asked, peering over Zephyr's shoulder as she adjusted the parameters on the console. It better, Zephyr replied, her voice steady. The alternative isn't exactly a walk in the park. And here I thought interstellar diplomacy was all about handshakes and polite nods, Finch said with a wry grin, not jury-rigging economic systems. Zephyr chuckled, though the sound was tinged with anxiety. Welcome to the glamorous life of a linguist. Yeah, glamorous, Finch said, shaking his head. Right up there with cleaning space toilets. Focus, gentlemen, Zephyr admonished, though a smile tugged at her lips. Let's not get sidetracked by our own misery. The air was tense with anticipation as they worked, each adjustment bringing them closer to a solution, or disaster. The Xylar leader remained silent, its eyes a constant reminder of the stakes involved. Almost there, Zephyr said, her fingers dancing over the touch interface. Just a few more tweaks. Famous last words, Finch said, though there was an undercurrent of hope in his voice. Let her work her magic, Finch, Rook said, giving Zephyr an encouraging nod. She's got this. Magic better than rabbit out of a hat, Finch muttered, but he fell silent, watching with bated breath. Minutes stretched into eternity as Zephyr completed the final adjustments. The console beeped, a reassuring sound in the silence. Done, she said, exhaling a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. Now we see if it sticks. The room was silent, tension thick enough to cut with a knife as they waited. The console hummed, a steady rhythm that was both reassuring and nerve-wracking. Anything? Finch asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Zephyr shook her head, her eyes fixed on the screen. Patience, Finch. It's like waiting for boiling water. Except if it boils over, we're toast, Finch replied, his tone a mix of dread and amusement. Always the optimist, Rook said, though his own voice was tense with anticipation. The console beeped again, the sound echoing like a gunshot in the silence. Zephyr leaned forward, her breath catching in her throat as she studied the readout. It's stabilizing, she said, her voice filled with cautious relief. The integration, it's working. Not dead yet? Finch asked, a grin spreading across his face. Not dead yet, Zephyr confirmed, though she couldn't quite suppress a laugh of relief. The Xylar leader approached, its eyes focused intently on Zephyr. Your solution is effective. We are impressed. Impressed, Finch said, his voice incredulous. I'd settle for not vaporized. This is a significant achievement, the Xylar leader continued, its voice a harmonious blend of pride and curiosity. Guess we're not just pretty faces after all, Rook said with a grin. You did well, Zeph, Finch said, his voice warm with genuine admiration. You really pulled our asses out of the fire. Zephyr shrugged, though her eyes sparkled with relief and pride. Just doing my job. The tension in the room finally eased, replaced by a tentative hope that maybe, just maybe, they'd make it out of this mess in one piece. So, Finch said, leaning back in his chair. What's next? Solve world hunger. Bring peace to the galaxy. One crisis at a time, Finch, Zephyr said, shaking her head with a smile. I'll settle for a nap, Rook said, rubbing his eyes. Saving civilizations is exhausting work. Agreed, Finch said, his own exhaustion starting to catch up with him. I could sleep for a week. The Xylar leader blinked, its gaze shifting between the humans. Your resilience is commendable. Resilience? Finch repeated, a wry smile on his lips. Just another word for too stubborn to quit. Call it what you want, Zephyr said, her voice thoughtful. But it's kept us alive this long. That it has, Finch agreed, his expression softening. The room was quiet, a fragile peace settling over them as they finally allowed themselves to breathe. It wasn't over yet, far from it, but they'd taken a step in the right direction. Here's to not dying today, Rook said, raising an imaginary glass. I'll drink to that, Finch said, joining in the mock toast. Cheers, Zephyr added, her smile genuine and warm. And so they sat, the tension finally easing as they allowed themselves a moment of respite. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep them going. For now. The shadows might still loom, the specter of failure still lurking at the edges of their thoughts. But they'd face the darkness and come out the other side, battered but unbroken. They'd made a breakthrough, and for the first time in a long while, hope didn't feel like a fool's dream. It wasn't much, but it was enough. For now. Zephyr took a deep breath, surveying the labyrinthine ruins around them. The air was thick with the kind of tension you could sharpen a knife on, and she couldn't afford to let her hands tremble, not when everything depended on her ability to integrate human trade principles with the baffling Xylar economy. No pressure, right? All right, gang, she said, her voice surprisingly steady. Let's work some human magic. Rook, you got those economic theories ready? Rook nodded, tapping away at the rusted console. Locked and loaded. Let's hope the Xylar don't mind a little creative accounting. If they do, we can always offer them Finch's head as an apology gift, Zephyr replied with a smirk. Hey, my head stays firmly attached, thank you very much, Finch retorted, his eyes darting towards the Xylar leader who watched them like a silent, many-eyed ghost. Besides, I doubt they have a taste for sarcasm. Zephyr chuckled, turning her attention back to the console. The The screen flickered, a cascade of alien symbols interspersed with human text. She took a moment to savor the absurdity. Here they were, on a frozen moon, playing economic Jenga with a species that could barely comprehend the concept of a market, all while hoping they didn't accidentally trigger an interstellar meltdown. She started inputting the data, her fingers moving across the touch interface with practiced precision. A sense of calm washed over her. This was her element where languages, be they spoken or numerical, danced to her command. "How's it looking?" Finch asked, peering over her shoulder like an exceptionally nosy parrot. "Like we're about to either solve a cosmic riddle or screw things up so royally we'll make it into the history books," Zephyr said, biting her lip. "Great," Finch deadpanned. "I've always wanted to be a footnote in an economic disaster study." Despite the tension, Zephyr felt a flicker of warmth at their banter. It was these moments, when gallows humor met genuine camaraderie, that reminded her why they were a team. Not just because they were thrown into this mess together, but because they chose to stick it out, sarcasm and all. The console beeped and a string of data scrolled across the screen. Zephyr's eyes flicked back and forth, and for a moment her heart lurched. The data was a mess of variables and constants, all intermingling like a drunken dance. "Come on, Zeph," Rook urged softly. "You've got this." She nodded, isolating a pattern, a glimmer of coherence amidst the chaos. It was the economic equivalent of finding a needle in a haystack while blindfolded. "Got it," she breathed, adjusting the parameters. "Now, let's see if this human touch does the trick." As the system processed the new input, Finch leaned back, crossing his arms. "You know, if this works, maybe we can write a how-to-book on interspecies economics. Trade with aliens for dummies." "And if it doesn't work," Rook chimed in, "then we write a different book, How Not to Die in Space, subtitle. We missed a few steps," Finch said with a shrug. Zephyr let out a laugh, the sound almost foreign in the tense quiet of the ruins. It was a good laugh, one that felt like a release, even as the console continued to hum ominously. Minutes crawled by, each second stretching like cosmic taffy. The Xyler leader remained motionless, its many eyes unblinking, as though it could see past the physical into the very heart of the numbers and intentions beneath. Finally, the console beeped again, and Zephyr's eyes snapped to the screen. The data had stabilized, a smooth flow that spoke of integration rather than dissonance. It wasn't perfect, like a jigsaw puzzle assembled under duress, but it held, it was working. "I think we did it," Zephyr said, her voice thick with disbelief. "The system's holding stable." "No fireworks?" Finch asked, an eyebrow raised. "No catastrophic failure? I feel cheated." "Guess we'll have to settle for not being blown to bits," Rook said with a grin. The Xyler leader stepped forward, its presence an unsettling blend of grace and power. "Your solution, it functions. The economic flow is balanced." "You're welcome," Finch said, with the air of someone who just fixed a leaky faucet rather than saved two civilizations. "No need for applause." Zephyr exhaled, feeling like a weight had been lifted, not just from her shoulders but from the very air around them. It was a tentative victory held together by duct tape and hope. "So what's next?" Rook asked. "We throw a party, file some interstellar patents on our economic genius." "Let's start by ensuring we don't accidentally unravel the fabric of reality," Zephyr replied, though her smile was genuine. The Xyler leader's eyes shifted, a ripple of movement that might have been its version of a nod. "Your actions have altered the course of our existence. We owe you our gratitude." "Gratitude's nice," Finch said, "but I'd settle for a hot shower and a warm meal." Zephyr turned to the console, securing the system to prevent any accidental disruptions. Her fingers moved over the interface, ensuring that the integration wouldn't falter when they weren't looking. "So, Zeph," Finch said, his tone lighter now. "How does it feel to be the architect of interplanetary peace?" She paused, considering the question. "Feels like I'm one step closer to a well-deserved vacation." "Just one step?" Rook asked with a chuckle. "Hey, it's a big step. You seen the size of these bloody ruins?" Zephyr quipped, gesturing around. Finch shook his head, his expression softening. Well, whatever happens next, I'm glad we're in this mess together. Even if it means listening to your optimistic drivel all day. She smirked, nudging him playfully. And I'm glad to have your cynicism keeping us grounded. The tension that had coiled in the air dissipated, leaving a sense of fragile peace in its wake. It wasn't over, not by a long shot, but they'd earned a moment of respite, a fleeting breath before plunging back into the chaos of existence. We should head back, Zephyr said, powering down the console. Let Command know we're not dead and might just have saved the universe. The Xylar leader inclined its head. We shall continue to observe the integration. Your presence has been enlightening. Happy to enlighten, Finch replied, not missing a beat. Next time, bring some snacks. The team gathered their gear, the familiar weight of their packs a comforting reminder of normalcy in an otherwise abnormal day. The ruins hummed with the machinery that had once seemed so alien and threatening. Here's to not dying today, Rook said again, echoing his earlier sentiment. This time, the words held a weight of triumph. Finch raised an imaginary glass, a lopsided grin on his face. Cheers to that, mate, cheers to that. As they made their way towards the exit, Zephyr found herself glancing back at the Xylar leader. Its eyes were still fixed on her, an unreadable expression in their depths. She gave it a nod, a silent acknowledgement of the tenuous alliance they'd forged. Think they'll be all right? Rook asked, falling into step beside her. I hope so, Zephyr replied. We've given them a start. What they do with it is up to them. And us, Finch added, his voice carrying a hint of genuine curiosity beneath the sarcasm. Zephyr shrugged, a small smile playing at her lips. We keep doing what we do best, muddling our way through and hoping for the best. And making sarcastic comments, Finch added with a wink. Naturally, Zephyr said. Wouldn't want to break tradition. They emerged from the ruins, the harsh, icy atmosphere of Ganymede a stark contrast to the warmth of their small victory. The wind bit at their faces, but it felt less hostile now, more like a reminder that they were, against the odds, still alive. As they trudged towards their ship, Zephyr allowed herself a moment of pride. They'd done something remarkable, something that might just ripple across galaxies. And while the future was uncertain and fraught with challenges, they'd proven that humanity's greatest strength lay in its ability to adapt, to bridge the gaps between species and systems, and to find humor even in the bleakest of scenarios. They'd saved a species and maybe, just maybe, earned a bit of reprieve for themselves. For now, at least they could breathe a little easier, knowing they'd pulled it off. As they reached the ship, Zephyr turned to her team, her friends, and let out a contented sigh. All right, let's get out of here before the universe changes its mind. And with that, they boarded the ship, leaving behind the ruins and the ghosts of uncertainty. They soared into the star-studded void, a ragtag group of survivors bound by cynicism, hope, and the shared belief that sometimes, even the darkest days could end with a laugh. The Xylar leader stood by the edge of the dusty, frost-bitten landing pad, its many eyes scanning the humans as if they were the most baffling equation ever devised. Zephyr never got used to the way those eyes moved independently, like a swarm of fish on caffeine. She cleared her throat, breaking the silence that had settled over the group like a wet blanket. Thanks for the observation privileges, she said, making a mental note to add ambassador to her ever-expanding list of job titles. We'd like to officially welcome you to the joyful chaos that is human economics. The Xylar leader's gaze shifted, eyes clicking like a living abacus. Your system is complex. Intriguing. That's one word for it, Finch muttered under his breath. I'd go with hot mess myself. Zephyr shot him a look that could freeze Mercury, but inwardly she couldn't help but agree. Human economics was a beast best described as a schizophrenic octopus trying to juggle flaming swords. Rook, ever the number-crunching optimist, stepped forward, laptop in hand. What we've done here is just the beginning. And by beginning, I mean we haven't completely screwed it up yet. The Xylar leader made a noise that, by sound alone, could have been a laugh or a particularly juicy sneeze. Your humor is unique. Yeah, it grows on you, Finch replied with a smirk like mold. The ruins around them groaned as machinery hummed beneath the surface, resonating with the knowledge that, for once, the gears hadn't ground to an ignominious halt. Zephyr wondered if the Xylar moon, with its labyrinthine catacombs and freezing winds, had ever witnessed anything quite like this, a union of minds across the vast, indifferent void of space. So, what's the plan, Zeph? Finch asked, turning to her with that look he always got when he was about to make a smart-ass comment. Besides getting the hell off this ice cube, Zephyr took a deep breath, feeling the weight of their success tempered by the knowledge that it all hinged on the continued goodwill of a species that could probably turn them into puddles of goo with a flick of their iridescent fingers. We head back, report our success, and hope they don't send us another celestial math problem to solve, or an intergalactic bill, Rook added, like someone who just remembered they left the oven on back at home, assuming home was several million miles away. The Xylar leader stepped forward, its many eyes reflecting the icy sun like a disco ball from hell. Your presence and knowledge have been beneficial. Zephyr couldn't help but chuckle, partly from relief, partly from disbelief. Glad we could be of service. Just remember we offer a no-refunds policy, or exchanges, Finch piped up, glancing at their surroundings as if expecting the walls to close in. We're fresh out of goodwill coupons. The Xylar seemed to shiver, its skin catching the light in a way that made it look like a living kaleidoscope. Our alliance, it is a new beginning. That's the spirit, Rook said, his voice carrying a bit more hope than usual. We'll work out the kinks, I'm sure. Maybe even make a killing on trading paper for hot meals and cold drinks, Finch said, winking at Zephyr. Isn't that what you economists dream about? More like nightmares, Zephyr shot back, but close enough. The wind picked up again, slicing through their clothes with the kind of chill that only Ganymede could muster. It was almost poetic, really. If you squinted past the biting cold and the imminent possibility of cosmic death, you could see how they'd pulled off a minor miracle. I suppose we'll be getting a crash course in alien economics, Rook mused, rubbing his hands together for warmth. Makes you wonder what else is out there waiting for human ingenuity or stupidity. Probably both, Finch said, shaking his head. This universe seems to have a knack for giving us just enough rope to hang ourselves. Zephyr sighed, her breath turning to mist in the crisp air. But we didn't. Not today, anyway. A toast to not screwing up, Finch said, raising an imaginary glass. May our luck hold and our mistakes be minor, Zephyr chuckled, the sound mingling with the distant echo of machinery. And may we never run out of sarcasm. Cheers. The Xylar leader watched this exchange with an expression, or lack thereof, that only a creature with many eyes could master. Your camaraderie is unusual. Yeah, humans are a bit of an acquired taste, Zephyr said, grinning. But we grow on you like a fungus, Finch added, earning him a playful shove from Zephyr. With a nod, a gesture that was becoming surprisingly familiar from a being so alien, the Xylar leader stepped back, allowing them space to depart. Our observation will continue. Your people have much to offer. Zephyr nodded, trying to ignore the niggling doubt that they'd bitten off more than they could chew. We'll be in touch then. And remember, no touching the big red buttons, or the small blue ones, Rook said, tapping the side of his head as if reminding himself. It's the little things that'll get you. Together, they made their way back to their ship, the crunch of frost beneath their boots a steady cadence that matched the rhythm of their beating hearts. It was a sound that spoke of survival, of stubborn resilience and the audacity to stare into the abyss and make a joke instead of a plea. As they approached the ship, Finch paused, glancing over his shoulder at the retreating figure of the Xylar leader. You think they'll be all right without us? Zephyr shrugged, not breaking stride. They've got a few of our tricks up their many sleeves now. I think they'll manage. We can always give them a subscription to Economics Weekly if they need a refresher, Rook said, his voice laced with dry humor. Right, Zephyr snorted. because nothing says interstellar friendship like unsolicited economic advice. Once inside the ship, the familiar hum of technology greeted them like an old, reliable friend. Zephyr felt a sense of relief wash over her, the kind that comes from knowing you've made it through another day without becoming a cautionary tale. "Well, that was fun," Finch said, plopping into his seat with an exaggerated groan. "So when's the next cosmic catastrophe scheduled?" Zephyr rolled her eyes, settling into her own seat with a grateful sigh. "Hopefully not anytime soon. I've had enough excitement to last a lifetime, or at least until the next mission," Rook said, flashing her a grin. With a flick of her wrist, Zephyr initiated the launch sequence, the ship rumbling to life beneath them. The world outside began to blur as they lifted off, leaving the desolate beauty of Ganymede behind. "You know," Finch said, his voice thoughtful as he stared out at the receding landscape, "there's a certain charm to not dying in space." "Yeah," Zephyr agreed, her eyes fixed on the stars beyond. "It's nice to have something to laugh about." The ship soared into the star-studded void, carrying with it the echoes of their laughter and the promise of new beginnings. It wasn't perfect, nothing ever was, but it was enough. For now, it was enough. The silence stretched, warm and comfortable, a rarity in their line of work. But as they left Ganymede and its secrets behind, Zephyr couldn't shake the feeling that they'd done something incredible, not just for the Xyler, but for humanity too. "We really did it, didn't we?" Rook said, breaking the silence with a hint of awe. "Yeah," Finch replied, a lazy smile playing at the corners of his lips. "We actually did." Zephyr felt a swell of pride, tempered by the knowledge that their journey was far from over. There would be other challenges, other missions, but for today they'd made a difference. And that, she decided, was worth all the sarcastic banter and near-death experiences in the universe. "Here's to the next adventure," Zephyr said, raising an imaginary toast to the stars. "To the next adventure," Finch echoed, his voice full of wry humor and unspoken gratitude. The ship hurtled through the void, a testament not to human tenacity or brilliance, but to their stubborn refusal to go quietly into that good night. And as they sailed into the unknown, Zephyr knew they'd face whatever came next with the same irreverence and camaraderie that had seen them through this mission. Because in the end, it wasn't the technology or the equations that had saved them. It was each other, flaws, sarcasm, and all. And for that, Zephyr thought with a smile, she was infinitely grateful.